Start. MTC. EBS 202, Test 1. Number 1. Dear Mr. Jansen, we received your application for the Stephen Christopher Scholarship. Stephen Christopher, we sincerely appreciate your interest. Each year hundreds of students apply for the scholarship, and your outstanding academic record placed you among the finalists. However, we regret to inform you that the scholarship has been granted to someone else who has a wider experience in the industry. Considering that you are a few years younger than the others who are also applying, we encourage you to gain more experience and expose yourself more to different challenges and situations in the corporate world. This experience will greatly benefit your qualifications the next time you apply for the same scholarship. We encourage you to reapply for next year's slot, and wish you the best of luck in your academic career. Sincerely, Jennifer Lowe. Jennifer Lowe. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS 202, Test 1. Number 2. I signaled to David, my diving teacher, that I was going down into the sea. David. As I slowly sank away from the lighted sea surface, I swam toward the cave wall. With a growing uneasiness, I realized that the cold was not nearly as much a problem as the dark. Underwater, it was completely, disorientingly dark. I couldn't see David, I couldn't see the bottom, and I could barely see the surface. David. I was breathing too fast, and my suit was too tight and confining. My panic grew at a rate almost too fast to control. I worked to calm myself, slow your breathing, adjust your buoyancy, move slowly. It worked. I didn't dash to the surface. I looked at David, and out of habit only I gave him a grin and a thumbs up, but it was enough to refocus and follow my training, adjust my buoyancy, take a slow breath, and proceed down. David. Now I was looking at my old invertebrate friends on the cave wall that had been the site of my very first underwater job. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS 202, Test 1. Number 3. People are distracted. They are distracted because information is everywhere and the selection of the relevant messages becomes increasingly difficult. So, even if a piece of information was successfully delivered, it doesn't mean it's been noticed, understood, internalized, and pondered. It may just be forgotten or neglected. This is why Consul Marcus Tullius Cicero said repetita iuvant, repetitions help. Marcus Tullius Cicero repetita iuvant. And the purpose is clear, ensuring the reception of that message or piece of information. It's best to repeat messages in different channels, even if it seems a redundant exercise. But only multi-channel information can somehow guarantee that a piece of information really reaches the audience. So, do not hesitate to repeat your content in emails, intranet, staff meetings, and so on. At some point it will reach the minds of your people and stick in their memory. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS 202, Test 1. Number 4. The foundation of an effective team is the recognition that each member needs every other member, and no individual can be successful without the cooperation of others. As a young boy I was a very enthusiastic baseball fan. My favorite player was the Hall of Fame pitcher Robin Roberts of the Philadelphia Phillies. Philadelphia Phillies Robin Roberts. During the early 1950s, his fastball dominated the National League. 1950. My uncle, who took me to my first ball game, explained that opposing batters were so intimidated by Roberts's fastball that they were automatic outs even before they got to the plate. Roberts. My uncle claimed that Robin Roberts was unstoppable. Robin Roberts. Even as a young boy I intuitively knew that no one was unstoppable by himself. I told my uncle that I knew how to stop Robin Roberts. Robin Roberts. Make me his catcher. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS, 202, Test 1. Number 5. People or firms that purchase services come in contact with other consumers as well as the service employees. For example, a hotel guest waits in line at the front desk or the concierge desk with other guests. In addition, the guests share facilities such as the pool, the restaurant, and the fitness center. Therefore, service firms must manage consumer interactions to the best of their abilities to ensure customer satisfaction. For example, a hotel's sales office would not want to book group business with a non-drinking religious group at the same time as a reunion of military veterans. The two groups are significantly different in behavior, and the expectation is that they would not mix well within the facilities at the same time. Similarly, restaurants separate smokers and non-smokers, and they should try to separate other patrons that show some potential for conflict. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS, 202, Test 1. Number 6. Great coaches know that they can get their athletes to perform well by drumming certain ideas into their heads. Foremost is the idea that the players are winners, so that they will think only of winning and never about the possibility of losing. Chances are high that they indeed will win because the image of themselves as winners will force them to concentrate only on the moves that ensure winning. This is basically the technique Jack Nicklaus, perhaps the greatest golfer of the past several decades, used to enhance his performance. Jack Nicklaus. Before every shot, he formed a mental picture in which he saw three things: 1. The target area the ball would land in, 2. The flight path of the ball to the target area, and 3. Himself using the appropriate swing for that particular shot. 1, 2, 3. In short, if athletes define themselves as winners, they are more likely to win. By the same token, if athletes define themselves as losers, they will very likely lose. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS, 202, Test 1. Number 7. A lichen is an organism consisting of a fungus and an alga living together, usually in an interdependent relationship. These hardy species are good biological indicators of air pollution because they continually absorb air as a source of nourishment. A highly polluted area around an industrial plant might have only gray-green crusty lichens or none at all. An area with moderate air pollution might support only orange crusty lichens. In contrast, areas with clean air can support larger varieties of lichens. Some lichen species are sensitive to specific air-polluting chemicals. Old man's beard and yellow Evamia lichens, for example, can sicken and die in the presence of excessive sulfur dioxide, S02, even if the pollutant originates far away. Avernia. For this reason, scientists discovered S02 pollution on Isle Royale, Michigan, in Lake Superior, an island where no car or tall factory chimney has ever existed. Superior, Michigan, Isle Royale. They used Evamia lichens to point the finger northwest toward coal binning facilities in and around the Canadian city of Thunder Bay, Ontario. Avernia, Ontario, Thunder Bay. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS, 202, Test 1. Number 8. Belize is the second smallest country in Central America in landmass, the smallest in population, yet is one of the most diverse in several ways. Subtropical in climate with a wet and a dry season, the country is located on the Caribbean Sea with Mexico to the north and Guatemala to the south and west. Most of Belize is low-lying country. The long coastline is often swampy with lagoons and many small islands. A coral barrier reef, the world's second longest, protects the coast from high sea tides, but not from frequent destructive hurricanes. The northern region is also lowland and heavily forested with old-growth hardwoods such as mahogany. These have been harvested for many years and have been important in the Belizean economy. For such a small country, there is surprising biodiversity. Belize is recognized as one of the world's ecological treasures, and as a result, ecotourism is a growing part of their economy. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS, 202, Test 1. Number 12. We behave, perform roles, as we think the role or roles should be performed, e.g., daughter or son, mother or father, etc. This is known as role-taking. We also assume that others we encounter will behave as we would behave if we were in their roles, that they will conform to a community standard or model. By adapting our behavior accordingly, the expected behavior or the perspective of the other is acting upon us. As we try to guess the intentions of the other is impacting our behavior. For example, if you smile at someone while at a party, it may be your way of attempting to make the person's acquaintance. If someone smiles back at you, your assumption is that he or she has the same intentions as you to make your acquaintance. Your behavior then may be to initiate a conversation with the person based on the smile being an assumed symbol or sign of cordiality. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS, 202, Test 1. Number 13. Which comes first, the site or the plan for the house? I advise my clients to choose the site first. This allows you to design a house to fit the land. You wouldn't buy a rug and then figure out what room it fits in later on. I believe a house should grow from its site and not look like it has been imported and dropped there haphazardly. If you have already selected your architect, bring him along to offer his opinion on the sites you are considering. He may well see things about a site that you may not see. The site you have in mind might not be appropriate for the house you desire. How many times have we seen houses placed awkwardly on a slope when the house design would clearly have been more comfortable on a flat site? Developments of tract houses are fertile ground for examples of house designs that were poorly fitted to their sites. These mismatches of house to site are akin to wearing a tuxedo with tennis shoes. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS, 202, Test 1. Number 14. It is very important in the information age to understand the difference between knowledge and information. What is accessible by computer and, indeed, what is published in the journals is information. Knowledge is something that has to be constructed in the mind of the expert reader. This is what scholarship is about. Information is, these days, instantly accessible, but knowledge still takes years of dedicated study to acquire. Imagine that a freak accident wiped out an entire field of experts on a subject while all were attending a conference. How long would it take to reconstruct expertise in the field so that research could once again progress? It would probably take many years, despite the fact that their research was all published. To take another example, what do producers of science documentaries for television programs do when they are researching their subjects? They talk to the experts rather than trying to read the journals. Quite rightly, as that is the only place that knowledge is to be found inside the heads of the scholars. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS, 202, Test 1. Number 15. It is very important in the information age to understand the difference between knowledge and information. What is accessible by computer and, indeed, what is published in the journals is information. Knowledge is something that has to be constructed in the mind of the expert reader. This is what scholarship is about. Information is, these days, instantly accessible, but knowledge still takes years of dedicated study to acquire. Imagine that a freak accident wiped out an entire field of experts on a subject while all were attending a conference. How long would it take to reconstruct expertise in the field so that research could once again progress? It would probably take many years, despite the fact that their research was all published. To take another example, what do producers of science documentaries for television programs do when they are researching their subjects? They talk to the experts rather than trying to read the journals. Quite rightly, as that is the only place that knowledge is to be found inside the heads of the scholars. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS 202, Test 1. Number 16. When people want to react correctly to a persuasive message but don't have the motivation or ability to think about it deeply, there is a shortcut they can take. They can observe the responses of others to the message. For example, if under such conditions you heard a political speech and everyone in the audience around you responded enthusiastically to it, you might well conclude that the speech was a good one and become persuaded in its direction. In addition, the more consensus you witnessed among audience members, the more likely you would be to follow their lead, even if you didn't initially agree with them. It's for this reason that interrogators are taught to say to a suspect, "We believe you are guilty," rather than "I believe you are guilty." MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS 202, Test 1. Number 17. Popular participation in conflict in the 19th century cannot be understood without examining the role of empire. 19. Individuals had always gone to the colonies for profit or to settle. But individuals also participated in 19th century imperial campaigns for a novel reason. 19. Hannah Arendt later dismissively characterized imperialism as the export of superfluous men and superfluous capital. Hannah Arendt. She was correct that colonial functionaries were often from marginal populations. Cecil Rhodes, after all, would advocate imperialism to settle surplus population and thus avoid civil war, but these marginalized individuals increasingly used their participation in colonial conflicts to make claims to membership in the home nation. Cecil Rhodes. Scots, for example, were excluded from membership of the English community, but by participating in the wars against France and the Empire in India, they became part of the British nation, increasing the war-fighting capacity of the latter. Empire was a crucial mechanism in constructing the exchange in the 19th century. 19. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS 202, Test 1. Number 18. Agricultural effects on water quality can occur at local, regional, and national scales. For example, increased levels of nutrients from agricultural fertilizers can stimulate algal blooms and affect the ecology of local streams. Nitrate and some chemical weed killers can move through the soil to groundwater and, eventually, to local streams. Farther downstream, these elevated nutrients can increase costs associated with treating the water so that it is suitable for drinking. Ultimately, chemicals associated with agricultural activities, such as nutrients and pesticides, and sediment, eroded soil, empty into our river mouths and can harm valuable commercial and recreational fisheries. Elevated nutrient inputs stimulate harmful algal blooms along the U.S. coasts, causing negative economic impacts. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS 202, Test 1. Number 19. Many sociologists identify themselves as researchers to the people they study. They do not worry that revealing their true identity will change their subjects' behavior. They are not overly concerned that subjects will hide secrets from them. Usually, they strive to minimize these problems by not getting too deeply involved with their subjects while simultaneously establishing a good rapport with them. This is not easy to accomplish, though. Nevertheless, such efforts have paid off, as indicated by some sociological insights that have emerged from their work. Herbert Gans, for example, became a participant observer in a poor Italian neighborhood in Boston in the late 1950s. Herbert Gans 1950. On the surface, the neighborhood looked like a badly organized place, an urban jungle of its period. Yet Gans discovered that it was a well-organized community and urban village rather than a jungle where the residents enjoyed close social relationships with one another. Gans. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS, 202, Test 1. Number 20. Only 10% of the mid-latitude rainforest in the Pacific Northwest remains untouched. 10. Forests in their natural condition once masked the area. This has been replaced by a checkered mosaic composed of plots of bare ground, recently replanted commercial saplings, and some mature forests. This type of land cover threatens the habitat of many plants and animals. Current conditions represent a chronically degrading environmental condition. The U.S. Forest Service, under public pressure and court orders, has altered the former approved clear-cutting strategy. Now some mature trees are left standing with the hope of encouraging a more natural regeneration of forest lands. Throughout the tropics, a pattern of replacing numerous species with a few favored ones is common. In particular, eucalyptus has been preferred over existing local species because it is fast-growing and, when cut for coppicing, its shoots quickly develop into new tree growth. However, the oil in its leaves results in a ground litter that inhibits undergrowth, with the result that soil erosion occurs. Hence, reforestation utilizing eucalyptus trees is not environmentally friendly. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS, 202, Test 1. Number 21. One particular problem that people sometimes struggle with is avoiding the use of masculine pronouns to refer to both men and women. Students often argue that using he or his is less cumbersome than writing he or she or his or her. As an alternative, you can rephrase a sentence to use a gender-neutral plural pronoun. The sentence "a doctor should be polite to his patients" excludes the possibility of female doctors, but doctors should be polite to their patients makes the same point without the gender bias. His, their, In the same way, you can replace masculine terms to refer to humans with gender-inclusive alternatives. Instead of saying man cannot live without water, you could say one cannot live without water or people cannot live without water. Man, one, people, Avoiding sexist language isn't all that difficult, but it may take conscious effort. The payoff is more effective interpersonal communication. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS, 202, Test 1. Number 22. The need for distinctiveness is a basic human need to which sport fandom can contribute. Although humans want to feel a sense of belonging with those around them, they simultaneously have a need to be different and unique. The fundamental need for uniqueness is best understood through Brewer's optimal distinctiveness theory. Brewer. According to this framework, individuals strive for two sometimes opposing social goals: inclusion and differentiation. These goals are best satisfied through identification with distinctive groups that satisfy both needs simultaneously. Given that brand consumption is associated with desires to be unique, it seems reasonable that individuals use sport fandom as an opportunity to meet their need for distinction by selectively choosing to follow non-mainstream sports or less popular teams. For instance, individuals can partially meet their need for uniqueness by identifying with a distant team or rooting for an underdog. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS, 202, Test 1. Number 23. Chunking is vital for cognition of music. If we had to encode it in our brains note by note, we'd struggle to make sense of anything more complex than the simplest children's songs. Of course, most accomplished musicians can play compositions containing many thousands of notes entirely from memory, without a note out of place. But this seemingly awesome accomplishment of recall is made possible by remembering the musical process, not the individual notes as such. If you ask a pianist to start a Mozart sonata from bar 41, she'll probably have to mentally replay the music from the start until reaching that bar. The score is not simply laid out in her mind, to be read from any arbitrary point. For one, it's rather like describing how you drive to work. You don't reel off the names of roads as an abstract list, but have to construct your route by mentally retreading it. When musicians make a mistake during rehearsal, they wind back to the start of a musical phrase, let's take it from the second verse, before restarting. 2. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS, 202, Test 1. Number 2425. What is wrong with pseudoscience? Certainly not just that it is basically false, since anyway all our factual theories are at best partially true. What is wrong with pseudoscience is, first, that it refuses to ground its doctrines and could not do it because pseudoscience makes a total break with our scientific heritage, which is not the case of scientific revolutions, all of which are partial since every new idea has to be judged by means of others that are not questioned in the given context. Second, pseudoscience refuses to test its doctrines by experiment proper. Moreover, it is largely untestable because it tends to interpret all data in such a way that its theses are confirmed no matter what happens. The pseudoscientist, like the fisherman, exaggerates his catch and neglects his failures or excuses them. Third, pseudoscience lacks a self-correction mechanism. It cannot learn from either fresh empirical information, which it swallows without digesting it, new scientific discoveries, which it looks down on, or criticism, which it rejects furiously. It can make no progress because it manages to interpret every failure as confirmation and every criticism as an attack. Differences of opinion among its believers, when such disagreements arise at all, lead to endless sect splitting rather than to progress. Fourth, the primary aim of pseudoscience is not to set up, test, and correct systems of hypotheses, theories, mapping reality, but to influence things and men. It has, like magic and like technology, a primarily practical aim rather than a cognitive one, but, unlike magic, it presents itself as science and, unlike technology, it does not enjoy the backing of science. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. EBS, 202, Test 1. Number 2627. On a beautiful spring afternoon, a softball game was held between rivals Central Washington University and Western Oregon University. Central Washington, Western Oregon. Western's Sarah Duchalski had never hit a home run, not even in batting practice. Western Sarah Duchalski. Then, in the second inning, she smashed the ball over the center field fence. 2. With 2 players on base, it would be a 3-run shot. 3. Thrilled, Duchalski sprinted toward first base. Duchalski. But as she watched the ball clear the fence, she missed first base. When she stopped quickly to go back and touch it, something in her knee gave out. She fell to the ground. In terrible pain, Duchalski crawled through the dirt back to first base. Duchalski. The Western coach rushed onto the field. Western. The umpires told the coach it was against the rules for Duchalski's Western teammates to help her around the bases. Duchalski Western. The coach could substitute a runner for her. But then the hit would be judged a single. The only home run of Duchalski's 4-year career would be erased. Duchalski 4. The coach didn't know what to do. That's when Mallory Holtman stepped in. Mallory Holtman. Holtman played first base for the other team. Holtman. She was also Central Washington's all-time home run leader. Central Washington. She knew that if her team lost the game, their playoff hopes would probably be gone. But after listening to the coach and umpire for a while, she asked a question. Is the other team allowed to carry her around the bases? The umpires said there was nothing in the rule book against it. So Holtman and Central's shortstop, Liz Wallace, walked over and helped Duchalski up. Holtman Central Liz Wallace Duchalski. Carrying her, they resumed the home run walk. At each base, they paused to let Duchalski touch it with her uninjured leg. Duchalski. Holtman said, I wonder what this must look like to other people. Holtman. The three players burst out laughing. The other people in the stadium weren't laughing, though. They were shedding tears at seeing such a moving act of sportsmanship. Duchalski's Western team ended up winning the game 4-2. Duchalski Western 4-2. Afterward, someone realized that the umpires had made a mistake. The rules did allow a substitute runner, after all. But it didn't really matter. In the end, it's not about winning and losing so much, said Holtman. Holtman. Twas about this girl. She hit it over the fence and ways in pain. And she deserved a home run. MTC. Good job.